Hi guys. In this video, questions to ask your interviewer. Item 1, always ask questions. Item 2, it's really okay to go in with a piece of paper with these questions typed out, written down. It shows a level of preparation. Item 3, your questions really do depend on the specific interviewer and adapting to personality type. Both are going to be really critical. Item 4, we're going to run through some quick questions to answer. So item 1, we'll keep this really basic. Always ask questions. And this is not just at the end of the interview. You really want to be asking questions throughout the interview because the more insight you can get into what they want for the role, the better. And so why are we asking questions, right? We're asking questions to show that we're engaged and interested in the role. If you're not asking questions, you don't really know what you're walking into, and accepting and taking a job is such a big decision. Uh, More importantly, though, again, deriving this critical information, not only if you're getting answers during, but especially at the end of that interview. You can take those answers and really apply them in future interviews. You'll know more about the process, what they're looking for, etc. So that's why these questions are so impactful. And one of the reasons for asking questions throughout the interview instead of just at the end, you'll run out of time. And I see this all the time happen in interviews. And that's not always a bad thing. It might mean you had great active dialogue, but sometimes you run out of time. So just something to be considering. Regardless, take this advice from somebody who's interviewed a lot of people. I never hired anybody who didn't ask questions. They weren't interested in the role, and that's what that shows. And so just having a few questions is always really great. Item 2, again, you create a list of questions and you bring it in. And why would the interviewer ever be upset with you? This shows an absolute level of preparation, and also you're wanting to create different lists for different people. It's a lot to remember, especially when you have the pressure of the day. It seems really easy to ask questions before you go in, but your brain is working on overload during an interview. So really have those questions written out, and then they will have answered some of those questions during the interview. So if you write down 20 questions per type of interviewer, then maybe you can ask 7 of them or 8 of them if you have the time. And again, keeping in mind that the questions you would ask a hiring manager will be different than you would ask a team member or a cross-functional person, etc. So item number 3, not all questions are going to be appropriate. Again, this is kind of a theme that we're going to carry throughout this conversation. Not all questions are appropriate depending on role and personality type. So you get into the interview and you have somebody who's very warm and open and nice, you're going to ask probably some more probing questions. Whereas you get into the interview and somebody's a little colder, a little more buttoned up, they're not really giving you a lot of information, you're probably not going to dig as deep with your questions. That adapting to personality type, if you're adapting appropriately, it will make you more likable. So it's really important. You're just going to have to adapt and adjust throughout the day, and the best candidates, the ones that can adapt and adjust, are typically the ones that get hired. Item 4, I thought a lot about how to handle this. This is the questions by interviewer. There's so much data out there. I want to give you a little bit of data, but I am going to run through these questions quickly. You definitely want to ask questions again during and at the end. And then the best part about this, again, is taking these learnings and applying them in future interviews that you have that day, because it's just so critical that you can take this information and have that application of it for your success. And so, in my opinion, in my career, the way I've always handled this is I get to personally know each interviewer, right? So I want to know what they like about the company, what they like about the role, what they think is great about the overall culture, environment. What do they like about their position? What has their career growth been like in the organization? So you really take an interest in them. If you don't take an interest in them, why should they take an interest in you? So really start with them, and that's going to be kind of a theme as we run through each one of these positions. So on the front end, when you see a lot of these articles and videos, they ask a lot of they propose that you ask a lot of questions in the interview that really should be covered on the front end. So typically you're going to be dealing with one of three people in the process. Big company, recruiter, big to medium-sized company, maybe an HR rep, recruiter, and then a smaller company, sometimes you're dealing directly with the hiring manager. These are the questions that they should cover before you go into the interview. So about the position. Why is the position open? How long has the position been open? How many people are interviewing, if they can tell you? And why do they think your background is a good fit? Logistics. I see the position is located in this specific location. Can you work out of another location? Can you work remote? Does this job require travel? What is the salary range? What are the specific benefits, including vacation, PTO, holidays, sick days, medical, dental, and any other perks that they have? Process. What is the process and what are the specific steps? How long is the process? How often will I hear back from you? And will you let me know if you were out on vacation? That last one, it sounds silly, but they should have a backup person and you should know who that backup person is. Again, this is before the interview. This is to make sure that everything is very streamlined. Lastly, you should know about the interview, how many interviews will be conducted, what are the stages, who is the final decision maker, and what topics will be covered in your interviews. These are questions that should not be asked during the interview. You should get all this information up front to the extent that you can. But it's really critical to know you want to spend your time asking good questions in the interview, not all this upfront information. And I know it's a lot to go through in a video, but you got to get this information up front, and I'll put that in the notes below. So again, ideally these questions are handled before. If you need to follow up with a couple of them during the interview, great. And then again, you're going to go into the pitch about talking about them and finding out more about them. So let's move on to the hiring manager. This is typically one of the most critical, especially for questions. So this is a mix of learning more about them and how you'll have success in the role. And so I really like to start with, I obviously looked at you up on LinkedIn, but tell me more about your career path. And then you're kind of learning more about what do they like about the role, what do they like about the company, what do they like about the culture, etc. And then with the hiring manager, you're going to streamline back to you. So how can hiring for this position help with your biggest challenges? What does success look like in this position in the first 3 to 6 months, the first year, the first 2 years? What is the typical career path for somebody in this position? How does this role fit into the overall strategy of the organization? Tell me about a typical day in this role. Are there any questions from the way I answered today or my background that I can answer for you? This is a really critical one. You want to make sure that you haven't left anything lingering out there, especially with the hiring manager. You might want to bump that question up to a little bit sooner, but that's a very, very critical question that you should be asking at some point. And then maybe talk a little bit more about what are any additional skills that they see would be an ideal fit for the role. And then this is the potential where you can talk about next steps. You should already know what the next steps are, but with the hiring manager, that just kind of reiterates interest. So let's flip over to a team member. So again, a team member, we're going to start with them. We're going to start talking about their background, what they like about the company, culture, etc. And then you're going to ask, what do you look for in a team member? Does the team work on projects together or alone? How do you foster a collaborative team? How will hiring this position help you? Is there a specific pain point that you're facing that this position can take off your plate or help you with? Right? So you're really thinking about questions that are in a team aspect, and you could definitely add to this list, but be thinking team, team, team. This person is considering that you're going to be sitting next to them or close by them and helping them with stuff. And so it's really important to be team focused in those questions. Lastly, a cross-functional interviewer. So oftentimes companies will bring in somebody from an outside team that you collaborate with often. So again, their background, company, culture, why they like their role. And then questions like, how does this team interact with your team? How often would we be working together? How does this role help your team have success? Questions like that are going to be, again, they're really team focused. Even though this person is sitting outside of your team, it's really critical. This is just scraping the surface. The reason why questions are so important is because they should be specific to you, what you want to find out. But having that level of preparation and then doing some adapting on the day, it can really help you. And so be thinking about all these items. I know that this was a quick run through, especially when we hit the questions, and that's why I'm going to put them below. The last item that I didn't really mention is the close. This is really limited for sales positions where you basically try and close them and say, hey, is there any reason why you're not going to hire me for this role, or something to that extent. Again, that is more for a sales position, but it's something that if you are in a sales role, it can be a really strong way to show that you know how to close a sale. I hope this information helps. Again, I know it's a lot, but the most important thing, ask questions. It will really, really not only improve how they feel about you, but it will help improve your success rate because you'll kind of be able to prepare and hone in and craft your answers in future interviews, knowing some additional information. Thanks so much.